Hi, April. Hello. Something from Bob.
Greetings. Hello.
Hi. All right. This 6:15. Really? Today.
Thanks for doing the minutes for me, Susie.
You're welcome.
I will do them today.
Okay. I'll take the corrections for
Okay,
this.
thank you.
What's the process for that? I didn't want to be nitpicky, but I just saw a couple of little things. Should I
Yep.
just send them back to you when I see them? I'm assuming he's probably saw the same ones I did.
Yeah, I don't usually get them ahead of the meeting. I don't see why they couldn't be sent.
Yeah, we discuss them in a group. So what I do is when I get the minutes, I just mark them up, and then when we have our meeting now, I just raise my hand for those items.
Okay,
And so basically we amend the minutes on the floor
okay,
in this meeting.
thanks.
Hey, folks.
Hey.
Looks like we're all here.
Everybody's here. Great. All right.
Summer's over.
Thanks for. Right. It is. All right. So thanks everybody for meeting on a weird night for us. So just for those of you who weren't at our last meeting, we're trying to get back on the correct cycle. So we will meet, I guess, in a week and a half or so, and that'll put us in back on track. We can stick with the Tuesday nights then.
So
Anyway,
it's the 17th.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes. And actually, one of the things we're going to do tonight is look at our schedule, and including the when we kind of plan on meeting with each of the departments. So we'll get to that a little bit later. All right. I have one additional item that wasn't in the posted agenda, which is we have to discuss an open meeting law violation. We'll get to that a little bit later, but Other than that, I will kind of just take us through this agenda. So bear with me for a sec. Okay. All right, so why don't we first look at minutes from August 27th.
Okay, so I'll move to accept the minutes from Tuesday, August 27th.
Second.
All right, any comments? Jim?
Yeah, they're just, I think Kathy was referring to the same things that I noted too. There are just a couple of grammatical things that caught our attention.
Yep.
Uh,
Do you
in,
want to walk us
yeah.
through those?
yeah, 2C, require should be required. And
Okay.
3E, meet should be meetings. Kathy, were there others?
4A, the contract is not projected to affect rather than
Right,
effect.
A.
Good, yeah.
That's the frustrated English teacher in me.
Mhm, yeah, well,
I never get that one right.
we're two English teachers here on FinCom.
Oh, boy. And I'm doing the minutes now. We're in trouble.
Yeah, you're in trouble, George.
Yeah.
No, it's a
We'll go
learning,
easy on this.
That's right.
learning, yeah, learning.
I'm going to benefit from
experience.
this. Thank you. Nice one.
Well, sometimes
Okay,
it
any
can-
other?
No.
All right, any other suggestions? Okay. So we've got a motion to approve the minutes. What do we say, as amended? And we have a second. So George, you want to
All right, I decide.
start the voting?
Well, actually, I abstain.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye.
Salvador, I.
And Stein abstain.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. And thanks, Susie. As your last minutes until you get roped into this again in a few years or something.
Hopefully it's a few years and not in a few weeks.
Right, right. Okay, next up, we are gonna just look at our budget request letter. And you give me sharing privileges?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
No problem. So last meeting, we looked at a draft that I put together, but we really didn't give you all enough time to make suggestions. And so our goal is to finalize this letter tonight. And Bob has some suggestions that he shared that I'm going to put up on my screen. And then if any others have suggestions as well, we ought to look at them.
When did those come? I didn't see them.
they just came.
So
They were
Yeah, they
recent,
just came.
They just came. Okay, I'll look it up then.
and I couldn't open the paragraph, the pages.
so
I
the
had
version I have,
Word and pages, I believe, but
yeah.
I
So
tried.
this
But they're
is
both the same.
this is right. They're the same. So this is what Bob shared. Bob, I just highlighted, I think the two, if I read this correctly, the two suggestions that you made, right? They were limited to these highlighted areas.
Yes.
That sound right, Bob? Okay. All right. So the first, and maybe you could give us a little bit of kind of your perspective on both of these suggestions. So one was to strike this sentence that concludes the first paragraph. Despite this, our budget-related articles were passed with only a small number of dissenting votes at annual town meeting. Anything you wanted to share,
Well,
Bob, on that?
well, I like the idea of that being struck from the draft, but it was shown as Strut when I received the copy that you sent me. I guess this
Oh, is
morning.
that right?
Yes.
Okay.
But I like it because I don't think we should make kind of those kind of statements about celebrating the fact that when people come to town meeting and many people are motivated to come down to town meeting in order to support spending. I don't think it's necessary to make that statement. That's my own view. The paragraph that I inserted, which follows it, is simply just a statement that we understand as finance committee and as managers of the budget, that there's the balance that we all know we have to strike between useful and necessary and costly services and the burden on taxpayers. So I thought that would just reference that issue to town departments because I think it bears repeating that this is part of the process that we have to undertake in order to come up with a budget that works for all. And I think it's really important to point out that the regressive tax, because it is a regressive tax, and it falls much more heavily on certain individuals than on others. That this is just mind-blowing to me that we haven't been able to address that issue except through this kind of means-tested subsidies, which I don't really care for because I don't like the way they're structured. But again, we have the system that we have. It's not likely to change in the foreseeable future. So those remarks just reflect that.
All right. Let's see if there are any reactions, comments on Bob's suggestion. So George?
Well, yeah, adding this paragraph, I'm not sure it's our responsibility to tell them department heads that the property tax laws in Massachusetts are regressive. We all know that. I think it's more important to tell them that, our goal is to keep the total increased budget, and that's the way I'd like to word it, at 2.5%. If we want to put in the comment about regressive, I think we should define why we think it's regressive, which is this tax is based on the value of properties, not the income of individuals. And I would also say it falls most heavily on retirees or fixed incomes or other fixed incomes. I don't think we should say that because we're picking out retirees and people on fixed incomes. I think what we can say, it falls more heavily on low earning individuals, households with lower incomes, because that's true. There's other classes of people and other types of people in our town who are also affected adversely from property taxes. So those are my comments. Just about this paragraph. I got more comments farther down.
Good. Okay. Sorry, 1 second. So one of your suggestions here, I'm not going to make it permanent, but it falls most heavily on households
Lower income households.
with
I don't know.
on lower income.
Yeah. It's not just retirees. We have lots of parents in town who are struggling and
Yeah. Right. That's good. Okay.
I feel like that is not an appropriate, this is not an appropriate place for these words. I feel like it implies that that's not something that the people who organize their budgets and send them into our town, it implies that they're not aware of that. I don't think that's true. And I think that we know that the people that do the work in this town work hard at what they're doing and dedicate more effort than their salaries even indicate. So I just don't feel like this is the place to bring up these topics. If this topic might go in front of voters, but not the service providers. And then we did not come to a conclusion as a committee that we wanted to keep the total increase to 2.5. So that's a debate that we all have to have here. And in fact, we in the draft that AJ put together, it talks about level service. So there's a piece to be worked out here. And then if advocating to take out, despite this, budget-related articles were passed with only a small number of dissenting votes, that also is political. Is that relevant to departments? It is actually, to me, it is, because it says to the departments that they are, the voters are supporting the numbers they gave us that we put in the budget. But I feel like maybe we could take that out if we want to say this isn't a political instrument. This is asking the departments to put together a budget.
April.
I have no problems striking the last sentence in the first paragraph. I don't think that's necessary. And I also agree that this isn't a time to be political with this request to the department heads. This is certainly material we can discuss when we're meeting with people and discussing their budgets. But I'd rather not see the second paragraph included in this draft letter.
Okay. Jim?
Yes, well, I support the second paragraph. It's good for us to remind everyone, including department heads, that the finance committee does represent, or supposedly is supposed to represent, the interests of the taxpayer in town. And although I'm not sure we always do that, nevertheless, it's important to remind people that it is something, at least, that we do have some belief in. And this paragraph does go to and speak to that issue.
Bob?
Yeah, I just want to defend the paragraph just a little. I'll say, to me, my definition, one of my definitions of politics is how public's money is spent. That's what politics is, the method that we use to figure that out, both in national, state, and local governments. And, you know, we all believe, I think that we all believe in the value of fairness. And I think that I'm just trying to point out in this paragraph that fairness is part of our concern as members of the FinCom when we work on this budget. Yes, people that come to us requesting funds to run their various departments will always need more to do more work, to do better work, to perform more successfully. And we always have to balance that against what I try to point out in this short paragraph, which is the ability of people to pay, particularly those who don't have the resources that many do have in this town. There's no mechanism other than trying to control spending and that for us to address that as members of this committee. Now, I just found out today that my Social Security is going up 1.8% this year. So if I look at that 1.8%, and I haven't figured out yet that Medicare is going up as well, you know, 2.5% on my property taxes will be, or the budget, which will be reflected somehow in my property taxes. You know, it doesn't really work out mathematically. You know, it's we have to address that issue, and the fact that people. I agree with you know, I understand the point that George made about that retirees are not the only people that have financial challenges, but it is true that we have a significant demographic in this town that does fall into that category. And just from my own observations, there's many people that are having a hard time keeping up with the inflation, which doesn't just affect the town's government, but it affects the taxpayer as well. So I think that's a very simple, and I was hoping it'd be very uncontroversial paragraph. And I still support the idea of us putting it in there. The idea that it's regressive tax, I'm not wedded to that. It's not obvious to everybody it's regressive tax, because I've been engaged in discussions in this committee where people have pointed out to me that, well, my house is appraised at X number of dollars, and so I pay more tax than you do, Bob. Well, you know, that argument is fallacious, because the gap between, you know, incomes and as a taxes as a percentage of income is great. It is very, 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 very remarkable, because, you know, someone could make hundreds of $1,000s and pay less than 1% to property tax, and their neighbor might pay up to 50% of their income to property tax. So this is an issue that we have to be aware of.
I think your point really is that, right, it's a fixed rate that applies to all households, right? It's not a graduated rate like an income tax. So, I mean, I think that's what defines it as a regressive tax. George?
Well, I would say what defines it as regressive is the basis for the tax is not your ability to pay the tax.
Mhm.
That's what makes it regressive, because if I inherit a big piece of property, but I don't make a lot of money, I'm up Schitt's Creek, you know? So that's why I consider it regressive. Listen to everybody else's comments. I just want to speak up on this. Right. I didn't even think about the 2.5%. Yeah, we don't know what it's going to be, what our total budget goal is, because we don't know what our revenues are. We don't know if there's going to be new revenues. We know there's a number of bills that can provide us with new revenues. So we don't know that at this point in time that we have a problem. Also, I do think this sentence is political. We're making a statement about the way the state of Massachusetts taxes, and I don't think this is the place to do it. I would also say that all our department heads know what's going on. We're not telling them anything here about regressive tax that they don't know. All of them live in town, except for I think the police chief and Ryan. So April made the point that we could certainly talk about this in meetings with these different department heads, or at some point if we find ourselves in a difficult situation. But in the next sentence, we talk about financial challenges. Everybody knows we have financial challenges. So I would vote against putting this in. And the finance committee's job, we can debate that all day long, by the way. Jim Hemingway made the comment that we represent the people, but we do more than that. We need to keep the town operating, and we're the ones who have to balance things. And so we have to look at where we are. And overall, I like this budget because we're requesting them to tell us what they think they need for level funding, and we can't tell them what to do now. We wouldn't know what they need to operate their departments if we told them to give us stripped down budgets. I want to know what they need to operate their budgets. If in March we find that we don't have the revenues for the budget, then we need to go back and find places to get that money. That's when I think you go to the managers to say, now we really got to work with you. I'm sorry, I speak too much.
Kathy?
I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other about the second paragraph, but I'm wondering with regard to this, the last sentence of the first one, would it make more sense just to spin it differently? I'm assuming our job is to remind the department heads of, how difficult a job this is and how fiscal 25 was challenging, but we did it. We got it. They got it done. Even though the budget increased by almost 4.5%. So rather than say it was passed with only a small number of dissenting votes, maybe just say something like, despite this, our budget-related articles were passed, with a majority, or however you want to say it in a more positive tone.
Something like, or passed by a majority.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of stating the obvious, but it's reinforcing that it was a tough year. The majority of townspeople recognized, the work that was done.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, Susie?
I think George misspoke when he said level funded.
I'm sorry, level, service. I
And
apologize.
especially as we have a new person, and sometimes that word does get lost on us, but it's a level services proposal further down on the paragraph.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. All right, so if I can I'll give my 2 cents here. So I'm not hearing a lot of supporters of this first sentence. So I'm just going to suggest that, without actually doing a vote, that we just strike this sentence, even the cleaned up version that Kathy shared. That seem reasonable? Anybody want to make a last ditch effort to salvage this sentence? All right, so let's get rid of that. Okay, so now we get to this paragraph. It seems to me that the critical point here, right, is not so much what the detail, well, it's not so much the paragraph, but it's kind of what is the guidance that we're giving them, right? Because we're potentially giving them contradictory guidance. At one point in the letter, we say we are asking you to present a level service budget. Okay, that's potentially produces a budget proposal that's some number different than 2.5%, right? It could be lower. It could be, but in some cases it may be higher. And so I think what we ought to get clear about, even aside from the language that's that's shared here, is what is our guidance for this essentially first step in the process of having department heads propose a budget. Is it to come back with a budget proposal that is a 2.5 or no greater than a 2.5% increase from FY25, or is it to come back with a level service budget? And I think we have to just make a critical, a decision about what's the right guidance, and that'll then determine what we should communicate in this paragraph or in the later paragraph. The folks, does that seem to make sense to people? So I'm wondering if I don't. Does anybody have? I mean, I think we have a pretty good sense of where people sort of stand on this issue. So I don't know if maybe we ought to just vote on which of these sort of competing bits of guidance to share with department heads. So maybe from FinCom members, if you can tell me how many of you support the guidance that would read something like, would like to keep the total increase to no greater than 2.5% over FY25. Can we just take a little poll without doing a motion here?
Yeah. Arvanitis.
Okay.
Arvanitis says no. I wouldn't want to add that in there. I'd like to strike this whole paragraph.
Okay. Let's see. Bob?
Well, yeah, I support
I see. Yeah. Jim?
Yeah, I would keep it in.
Okay. All right. I prefer the level service guidance, so I'm gonna vote no on this. Who's next?
Level services from Susie Mosier.
Okay. And who's next? Kathy?
Yeah, I guess level service budget works for me.
Okay. All right. And April? Oh, you're muted, April.
Sorry, my husband's practicing drums.
Okay.
I would support level services as the guidance,
Okay.
which could be 2.5%.
Right. Right. Hopefully it is, right, for many departments.
Yeah.
Imagine it probably won't be for the school, but we'll see, right? Okay, so I think given that has implications about what we do with this paragraph. So I don't think we can say, at least this sentence, with this in mind, the Finance Committee would like to keep the total increase to 2.5%, because again, that potentially contradicts guidance we're sharing later. So I think given how we just voted, I'm going to strike at least that sentence. So then the question becomes do these first couple of sentences in this paragraph, do they, add some value to this letter? So does anybody have any other additional thoughts about that? Is there some way to include these two sentences or the concept somewhere? Is it worth doing? Bob?
I'm going to say something to respond to embellish what Jim Hemingway said and to respond to what George said. And George, you know it because you've read the handbook that we get from the Mass Municipal Association and from the Association of Finance Committees that lays out the history and function of finance committees in town government. And they refer to the Finance Committee in their various ways, one description is a watchdog, one is but it's very clear that they say that we have a checks and balances government. And of course, it does it does include the executives, which are the select board, and also the town employees represented by the select board in rough understanding, my understanding of the document. But the town meeting, which is our populace, is represented by the finance committee. So that is, we're in between the town government, its need for funds, and the taxpayer. And that's our job, is to mediate that that relationship, and we represent the taxpayer. I think that's pretty clear to me. And I disagree with you that it's not. I know we have responsibility to undertake that negotiation and end up with a budget which is fair and equitable and represents the interests of the taxpayer overall, basically, because the taxpayer needs services, as we all understand. And we can argue about what services are essential and which ones are not. But we definitely, I think, represent the taxpayer. And that is why I put this, I wanted to include the sentence in our document, because, you know, in good faith, town employees, town department heads really do want more resources to do a better job, you know, whether it be a new fire truck, cruiser, you know, whatever it might be. And we have to stand in the way of that and represent the ability to pay part of the equation. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. That's the way it's designed. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Susie?
I've read that manual twice, carefully. I've taken a lot of notes in it. And what I read in that handbook is that we're involved in a process. And I've actually found sections in that book, and I'm like, wow, we got that done. We're doing that. Capital planning, projecting over time. The town of Shutesbury has worked at creating a budget process that has a lot of pieces in it that are right in that manual. It is not saying that we are in some sort of adversarial role or the only people who are thinking in terms of the taxpayer. And it's not that we're only thinking in terms of what departments want. It is a process. It is a balance. We've taken many of the steps to make that happen. And I think the town of Shutesbury is doing quite well financially. It's stable. It's met a bunch of things that are like not expected. And it has met things that are expected because it has processes in place. So I do not see, I know it has the word watchdog in that once, but it has a lot of other words in that manual that say, we have a job to keep this together, to see the longer picture and to meet the needs of the town. And we rely on the providers of those services. And I do not believe we're excessively supporting them. And I don't believe they come to us with excessive demands. I feel like we're very balanced about this. And in reading that manual a couple of times through, my notes keep coming up with, oh, we're doing this right. And I think that our success shows in the way our town runs.
So one suggestion just to wrap up this letter. I mean, I think my feeling is these sentences are probably not necessary, but I also don't have like a huge objection to including them. I think if we include them, I think we probably just ought to move it slightly and I was thinking maybe I'm not, because I just don't think it's sort of belongs as its own paragraph. So potentially somewhere like up here after we talk about how FY25, I don't know. But again, I'm not convinced it's necessary, but like I said, I you know, if few members feel strongly that it adds value to the letter, I'm okay with it being in there. April.
Yeah, maybe just one way to change it would be our budget is supported mostly through the residential property taxes, which has a greater impact on low income and fixed income residents or households. Something to that effect.
Yeah, which has a greater impact. Is that what you said? Yeah, on
lower income
households
and fixed income.
Lower and fixed.
Fixed.
Yeah.
Households. Okay. How do people feel about that? Bob, how do you feel about this?
I'd find that better than leaving it out. Yes, I would accept that.
Okay, George?
I don't know what value that sentence brings to the process. We're asking the department heads to give us their budgets. We want detailed budgets. We're going to follow up with them to learn about and make sure we understand how their departments operate and what they need to provide level services. I think it's more important to put a caveat in this and say, at the end of our budget process before town meeting, we're going to review the total impact of all the budgets. And at that point, we should warn everybody there is a possibility we'll come back and ask for more cuts. I think that's how this letter should read, but that's me. I just don't see value to this. I don't see how that's relevant to asking them to tell us how much money they think they need to operate their budgets. They already know about the challenges. They all live in town. They all pay property taxes just like us.
All right, so why don't we do this? Why don't we take a vote on whether to include this sentence in this first paragraph as written here, you know, as modified here, and see how people feel about it, and then we can take it from there. George?
Arvanitis, take it out.
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, I'll say aye.
Mosier, abstain.
Who's next? Kathy? Did we lose Kathy? Oh, no.
So, no, I'm here.
no, here,
I'm
here.
just thinking, Salvador, my only suggestion might be if you're gonna leave it in, it maybe belongs better in the third paragraph than in the first.
1, 2, 3, yeah. We commented for minimizing. All right. Well, let's take April's vote, and then we'll figure
Yeah.
out if we want to move it.
Yeah,
April?
I think we should keep that sentence included, and I am open to that. I think maybe the third paragraph is more appropriate.
All right. So we commend departments for minimizing operating expense or asking for
Mm.
And maybe after this is our starting point, throw it there.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that work for folks?
Sure.
Sure.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Not beat it to death.
Yeah, thanks for
Um,
hanging in. I know this can like editing by consensus can be a painful process, but you know, I'm happy we have something we can share now. So okay, I'll clean this up after we wrap up, but this is our budget request letter. So let me stop sharing. And Bob, thanks for taking the time, you know, to draft your suggestions. I do appreciate that.
Letting me talk about what was important to me, so I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Let's say, okay, and I don't think we necessarily need to do anything other than update the fiscal year to the budget form, but let me just share it quickly just to make sure that we're good with it. Why isn't that opening? Sorry guys, my computer's slow. Okay. Here it is. Okay, any need for any changes to this? Let me make it bigger. All right. So we will, again, like we've done for the least, I think the last couple of years, we'll pre-populate the FY25 budget amounts, and then they'll enter proposed amounts for FY26. And then we have a short little section for them to mention any potential capital requests they might make in this year. So let me go to Susie.
Last year, when I was preparing for our meetings, I would look to see what the actual expenditure of the previous year was, which is not the same as what we have on that column FY25 budget amount. So I'm wondering if we, I mean, I wonder if that would be helpful.
Okay. So the point is that whether include as the kind of baseline column their budget, their budgeted amount, or their actual amount expended.
Or maybe it was just the
That's a
way
good
I filled
question.
it in. Maybe I shouldn't have filled it in with what was on the budget, but anyways.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea. Your budget for FY25, your actual spend of FY24, it's the same thing we put on the
Yeah.
budget that we present to town. I think it's a really good idea.
So potentially both, right?
Yeah, I would say actual spending. I mean, Susie, you're doing the work, so you can tell us the
Right,
exact
what a stupid, right, right.
actual spend FY23,
Four.
budget FY24, and then your request for our 25, excuse me. I'm sorry, actual 24, your budget for 25, and please fill in
Oh yeah, right.
your 26 request. Also, I would
All
say,
right, wait, let's think about this. Right, yeah. So it would be
Before
FY25
you get too
budget.
far and have it finished, we don't have those final numbers yet.
no, it'd have to be final numbers for 24. Susie will have that.
Don't have them yet. The budget is not closed.
Right, so that's what I was thinking about is how, first of all, I would need to figure out, maybe I would put an asterisk. You know, it isn't closed. Probably a lot of it's closed, but some of it's not closed. So
Right.
either an asterisk for
Right,
those that
right.
aren't closed, or just in general an asterisk.
Yeah, I mean, how different could it
Mhm.
be on some of those departments?
It
Could
depends. It depends.
Yeah.
Department.
I mean, that's the way we always do budgets. We always gave those actuals because there could be differences. And sometimes they spend their money in FY20 fiscal 24, and they're doing that long after they already created their 25 budget. So there could be a variance right there because something changed in their department. And so it's kind of a way to highlight that, to flag that. The other thing I wanted to say was, should we put, because Susie, you're making one for each specific department, can we put the liaison's name on this?
Yeah, I
that the
do. That's the
that-
contact.
That's the contact, okay. And then, and finally, because this is an Excel spreadsheet, I would reformat it slightly. I think the format's fine. It's just the way the numbers go in. I don't know, Susie, if you want, maybe we can spend 10 minutes and I can just change it slightly.
Yeah.
Just so it's, I don't know, maybe it doesn't matter, but I think I can make it a little easier to use for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I was thinking about, I have all of last year's and I was just gonna change the dates. And if any liaisons have moved around, but you and I can work on it. I think we're close here.
Yeah, well, that said, I might not have time, but
Yeah.
Okay, Bob.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest, Susie, I don't know if this makes sense to you and George. We have the budget from last year, which has the historical record for every department built into it, and has the actual and the budgeted amounts for each department. So I think we could simply copy the page, the relevant page, send it with the rest of the information going to department head. It might save you a lot of work having to draw up a new spreadsheet, and the information you're going to be harvesting is from that document anyway, is it not?
No, it's new.
And we send the we send it by email, so, you know, we wouldn't send the whole budget form to them. So anyways, we'll figure it out. I don't mind doing the work once we figure it out. I think it'll become
Mhm.
clearer.
Okay, so, Kathy,
So just to Bob's point, I'm looking at the town budget, and I understand what he's saying. It might make sense to follow this format, which also shows percent difference. I don't know if that makes a difference in this budget request form, but it might be a reminder to the department heads what the previous year looked like in terms of difference from actual budget to actual. Does that make sense? Am I speaking another language?
no, that makes sense. It's a little tricky, right? Because we're in FY 25, right? We're basically in the first couple months. So we want to be able to see how each department's proposed budget within each of their categories compares to what's been budgeted and approved by town meeting for this current fiscal year, which we can't really say a lot about how they're expending money because it's early in the year. But I guess there's some of the points here are about kind of going back and seeing how, like, for example, how their FY24 expended amounts corresponded to their budgeted amounts. So I kind of feel like we're probably going to talk about that with them when we meet with department heads, right? Like we're going to, in addition to looking at their budget, we're going to all have their, have our expense reports, and we'll be able to kind of, well, I guess the budget, and we'll be able to kind of look back at the historical data.
Okay.
We do that on a regular basis. We're looking at the expense reports as the year goes.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, if we've got a department head that's got a proposed amount, let's say it's larger, than their FY25 budget amount, and we've been looking at the expense reports, and we know that they underspent their budget last year. I mean, like, that's something we're going to bring up in discussion with them, right? Like, why do we, if there's been a little bit of a pattern of us underspending this budget line, what's the rationale for increasing it, right? That's part of the discussion we're going to have with department heads. I'm not sure we need to put that information in this form. All right, so can we leave it as that George and Susie will do a little bit of tweaking, but probably nothing
But the
too
format's basically
substantial that would require us, right? That would require us to have a conversation about it. Bob, I see your hand up.
I just want to just to reflect what George and Susie are doing here. Susie is correct to ask for historical data, because we've had experiences on the committee since I've been on it. Somebody will come and just make a request, and there's no context whatsoever in the document. I think it's good to provide that context for everyone's understanding of the history of this department. And so we have a better understanding of the trends, whatever they might be. And so just the way this form is better than what we had in the past, I think it's an improvement just the way it is. So that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agree. Okay. All right. So, George, it sounds like you might do a little bit of tweaking, and if you can collaborate with Susie on that, and then Susie, you'll kind of do what you've done in the past. Really appreciate it.
So I'm a little confused.
yeah.
Do we decide not to have spending a column for the spent money in 24? Do we know it's not fixed. I mean, we know it's not finalized, but would we put an asterisk and put in that column of spent money in 24? What was appropriated at town meeting in 25, and then their proposed number? Or are
Yeah.
we saying not to do that?
I would be in favor of that as long as we're doing, that's an additional column. It's not replacing
Right,
That's
the
right.
FY
That's right.
25
We can fit it
budgeted amount,
easily.
right? Yeah.
We can fit it
Yeah.
easily.
right.
As long as Susie is okay doing the work.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, that's really the question, right? Yeah.
I am.
Because I do think that's useful context.
3 columns. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right, great. So we've got budget letter, budget form, and then we also have, I'll just pull it up, our actual meeting schedule, which I have to share with you guys because the version that I sent before our last meeting had dates that needed to be updated because they were dates that were overlapping with select board. So this is our new kind of tentative schedule with meeting dates that don't conflict with the regular select board meeting schedule. So we start with Highway Fire Department on November 12th. And, you can see the rest of this basically follows the order that we used for last year. We've got our target is, annual town meeting on April 26th, public information meeting on April 24th. What's not on here are 4 town meetings, but obviously those are going to get scheduled and we'll this is a document that we'll update. I'll always share with you the current version as we make changes to this. Okay, any questions about the schedule or any concerns about the order in which we're putting things? Susie?
I'm gonna follow up with the school committee right off the bat because I think we run into this thing of when we're trying to do ours, which is January 21st, and I think that will work, but sometimes their meeting schedule is the 3rd Thursday and they may not have done their official vote by then.
Got it. Okay. All right, that'd be great.
They-
Susie,
they've often
I can't
had-
recall why.
Yeah.
Sorry, Becky, go ahead.
Yeah, but they've often had it, by the beginning of the year, so it varies.
Yeah, and they had a funny meeting schedule last year, and I'm gonna make sure they figure it out, because I think they've been trying to skip a meeting in December, and then they're not ready in January,
see.
but I'll find out.
Okay, and just to remind people, we do something slightly different with the elementary school, which is that we'd look at an early draft budget without any of without the finance director, right? Just to generate a set of questions that Susie then can bring back to the finance director, so that we can get answers to those questions when we, before we meet with them in January. Susie, can you, I can't remember why I've got Saturday, December 24th on this.
Probably
Is that
a placeholder for the 4 town meeting, I bet.
maybe? Yeah. All right. So, all right. That
That's
could
why
be
it's
it.
Saturday, right?
Yeah, but it's unlikely
Yeah.
Christmas Eve, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah,
It's
I
probably much sooner.
can't see that happening right the day before. I'm going to take it off for now, but obviously we're going to have to add multiple dates to this for when, we're going to have more it's certain that we're going to have more 4 town meetings than we have in the last couple of years. So we'll just have to add those as they get scheduled. I believe we're going to have one on either the 3rd or 4th Saturday this month. More on that in a bit, but so I think it's possible that like on the 21st or 28th. Becky, you haven't heard anything, have you? From the
No,
school
not-
committee about, or the superintendent's office? Okay.
No,
They
they
did.
just that December 24th is a Tuesday, not a Saturday.
Oh, that's what it was. Okay.
Oh,
got it.
right, sorry.
And like
That-
the
that-
31st, I mean, December 31st for the select board is, you know, a problem, just like the 24th, Christmas
Yeah.
Eve, you probably don't want a meeting.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I'm going to take it off for now. And we do have a bit kind of a significant gap here in between December 10th and January 7th. So I think it's likely that we'll add being in there at some point, but let's just leave this schedule as it is for now, and we'll modify as needed. George?
Yeah, well, that's the reason I raised my hand is probably a gap in there is probably good. I'm noticing that we're meeting with people, departments, and no time to take care of our own business, which ends up causing us to have 3-hour meetings. So I was just going to comment, it would be good if we had 1 or 2 open dates, not only for us able to conduct our own business, but invariably some department can't make their scheduled date and we need to move them around. So it's always good to have gaps in the calendar.
Yeah.
You know, and then I was looking at the elementary school. Well, I know Susie's going to be talking to him, but I don't like the idea of having the elementary school with any other department on the same night because the elementary school tends to take a long time. And then whoever's there to meet with us is waiting. Also, the collector's budget's pretty simple. She's usually very organized and very detailed, and we get through hers quickly. So I think the accountant's is really her budget. She's the same. The two of them, I
So what
think,
if we did that? Yeah.
exactly. That's what I was going to suggest.
Yeah. Okay, I think that makes sense. Yeah. All right. That's good. And I think what we might do is kind of somewhere either Wednesday, December
18th.
18th, or potentially Monday, December, what is that? 23rd. I could see us having an open date, something like that.
Why Wednesday?
Because not
Well,
the
we meet on the 17th because that's the select board
Oh, got it.
on that Tuesday. So we would have to have an alternative date. So anyway,
Right.
so I'll keep potentially those 2 dates as open dates.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Right. Let's see. Step. Where did my agenda go? Okay. Let me give just, an update on, as we just talked about it. So the regional school committee met, I think I mentioned at our last meeting on 27th of August. That was the night we were meeting. It was their first proper meeting, really since I think June, maybe July. Early July they met. A number of important finance related details came out of that meeting. I did watch a recording. One of the things that I found extremely helpful is there was a presentation by Tracy Novick. Is that? I think I'm getting the name right. Yeah. Who is the field director that's responsible for our area for the Massachusetts Association of School Committees. And she's really an expert on school finance issues in Massachusetts. And so the school committee had asked her to give a presentation, which she did. Probably was about maybe a 45-minute or so presentation. It's quite detailed. I shared with you really just
You're breaking up.
You're breaking up. We can't hear you.
Oh, am I?
Yeah.
Can't hear me now? Or is that?
I can hear you
Okay.
now.
All right. So what I'm going to suggest is before our Four Towns meeting, I'm going to strongly encourage everybody on the committee to watch her presentation and have these slides open. It is the best explanation that I've heard since being on the finance committee about how the foundation budget is produced, calculated, and it is such a complicated process, and it is so hard to understand it if you're just reading the documents that Desi shares, and without having somebody kind of walk you through the process. And I just really think it benefits anybody who's going to be participating in these budget negotiations to have this kind of foundational knowledge. So I'm going to send you all a link to with a time code to the recording of that meeting, and would really like you all to watch that before our Four Towns meeting. They did discuss both the kind of guidance that Amherst and Pelham had shared in their letters to the school committee, and the feedback that they've gotten about needing to get a much earlier start. They committed, although they didn't set a date at the meeting, they did commit to having a Four Towns meeting in September. And so that's why I think it's going to be the third or fourth Saturday of the month. So maybe you can start to like put a little hold on your calendars, just until we hear when that meeting is going to take place. I assume it's going to be a Saturday, although I suppose it's possible that they'll pick a different day. There was a little bit of a discussion and maybe even a disagreement about what the focus of that first Four Towns meeting ought to be. Some members of the school committee were really kind of took the position that it's too early to talk about concrete numbers and budget amounts and caps and what increases towns are willing to accept, that, and that it really ought to be focused on process. What is the budget? What is the information that we all, as a large group of people who are going to be involved in this discussion, what is the data, the information that we're going to need? What is how often are we going to meet? What's our process? So there were some members that were kind of suggesting that ought to be the focus of that meeting. And then there were some other members, I think, including the Leverett rep and Irv from Amherst, who just were saying, no, we need to actually start to have kind of, even if they're highly like super tentative numbers, we need to actually talk about numbers. So it's not entirely clear what the agenda for that meeting is going to be, but I just want you all to know that there is going to be the first Four Towns meeting to discuss the FY26 budget. Should be happening later this month, which I think is good progress. I think we ought to have a conversation about what it is that we want to communicate at that meeting. If there is a place to talk about, like, what are towns willing, or like what guidance we are going to be providing to the committee. So essentially, Pelham and Amherst have put in writing that they are that they want to use a 2.5% increase as kind of a limit to what they would like to see, right? That's kind of their official guidance as articulated in the letters that they've sent. I think we ought to have a conversation. I don't know if we can resolve that tonight about whether we want to have a position that is tied to a specific number. I'm not sure. I personally feel like that's necessarily the best way to go into this meeting, but since 2 of the 4 towns have communicated a percentage increase, we ought to. I do think that a couple things I do feel strongly about that I just want to share with you all. I think there's probably going to be consensus about this, is that this whole idea that Amherst put forth in their letter about extracting the portion of their increase that they incurred for FY25 that came from ESSER, not ESSER, sorry, ARPA funds, that they somehow want to remove that. I think we ought to be very clearly state that that's not something that we can that we approve of. I just think that's a bad precedent to have any one town say, well, we want to have a different baseline than what we were actually assessed in the prior fiscal year. I don't think that's a good practice. So that is one I wanted to just make sure that we were in agreement about. And then I think the second thing that I do feel strongly that we ought to be prepared to communicate at that meeting is that we are not gonna we're not going to be comfortable with a budget process that says here's a fixed increase that is going to be imposed on all towns, whether that's 2.5% or 4% or some other percent. We don't want a budget process that just says, okay, let's find a compromise on what's the percentage increase that all 4 towns are willing to live with, and let's apply that. On those 2 points, do we have agreement about that, or does anybody want to speak to that, Bob?
Yeah, I disagree with you on those points, AJ. I'll tell you
Okay.
why. I've spoken in the past, and I'll say it again briefly now, that there's some serious structural issues with the regional school. I think, frankly, there is with our school too, that have to do with enrollment, declining enrollment, and increasing budgets over time. And I've seen that the last year, I think we got kind of sideswiped by the school committee, and we were all put in a bad position where we had to try to enforce some fiscal discipline on them, but it became politically impossible to do so because things had advanced so far that we had to go ahead and agree to 6%, which was a vast increase for us. And then we got out of the system that we have so carefully sort of lobbied to support. That is the statutory method, and there was no equity really in the budget process or the way that it was paid for, as far as I could see. That was all removed except for the guardrails. So I think really, I don't know why. I know it's very difficult to run a regional system like we have, and I feel a lot of sympathy for the people that have to do it. But I would like to know from you, number one, have you spoken to Doug Slaughter about what his views are as the financial director and how he feels about it? Because I think he's a big part of this process, along with the school committee. But I do think that there's a limit to what people can pay, just like I said before about our budgeting process. And the school with a declining enrollment has to address the number of students they have now and make real budgets for the real population, which is now in a decline of a couple of decades, I say at least. And I looked at the slide stack that you sent, and it shows those data pretty clearly. So I don't think that anything should be off the table. I think there should be some financial discussion at the first 4-town meeting. Absolutely. That's why we are calling for it, because we don't want to have a confused, chaotic situation like we had last year. So yeah, so hopefully we can encourage the school committee and Doug to come up with some preliminary ideas and face the fact there's going to run into some resistance, including from me, if they just want to continue business as usual, because I don't think that's going to work considering the state of things. So yeah, I disagree with you on those 2 points, AJ. And I think there should be a financial discussion. I don't know if you support that idea, but it seems like that's what this is all about, is the financial discussion.
Yeah. Susie?
It's taken me a while to think about 2.5 increase in the tax rate is not the same as 2.5 in a budget, because there's revenues coming from other than the tax increase. There's new growth, there's state aid, there's grants. So when they put a cap on increasing a specific budget to 2.5, that does not seem tied enough to me to the fact that the revenues, the full revenue picture is more than just the tax levy. So I think that somehow these two things get tied, and I don't really see that that is a particularly logical idea. And I think it's true we need to talk about some of the increases we feel prepared to handle. But I mean, our budget went up 4.5%, but it's not clear to me yet what our tax levy is going to go up. We won't know that till November. And so it may, it's not, those things are not as tied as people like to put out there. So I can see why they don't want to go deep into the numbers in September. And I would love to have a talk with Amherst about what kind of new growth revenue they're getting. So I think that there's a reason that some people are saying we can't be talking about like the staffing pattern. There could be talking about the staffing needs. And I do think even though we have a decrease in enrollment, we have increasing needs in our student population, all sorts of needs. And I believe we're not out from under the COVID demands. And so there's a lot of different pressures. We probably just need people to begin to identify them, but we can't come to the numbers yet.
George?
Yeah, I'm in the same place. I think it's too soon to commit to anything. I think it's good that we're going to be meeting regularly, and I think the first thing that I would like to see is have Doug crunch the numbers these different ways that he's talking about. What would it look like if they pulled ESSER, all that ESSER funding out, and then what would increases for each town look like? That's just raw numbers that he could easily put together, and that's something that we can start to look at and get a feel for. As far as the decreasing population, Susie brings up a point that I wasn't thinking of, and that is, and I do think about it often, is we know that there is increased service requirement in the schools because of the needs that we found during COVID for the students. And also, we've been cutting this budget year after year. I mean, the budget goes up maybe for sure, but there have been cuts in the regional school system many times in the last 10 years. And a lot of that was definitely a result of lower enrollments, but we were also cutting to some extent programs. So when you have lower enrollments, I'm fine with lowering costs, but when you start cutting programs, that's not because of lower enrollments. You're cutting programs because you're having a financial problem. And so I am very curious to see, there's another reason why I don't want to commit to a position at this point in time is the superintendent is having an audit right now of the finances. So she's doing a deep dive on the finances, and it would be very interesting to see what she comes back with. So at this point, I would say we're Switzerland on this. We'd like to see the raw numbers because we know you can put them together. What would happen if you do what Amherst and Pelham is suggesting? But I wouldn't want to go beyond that. And as far as the revenue conversation that Susie's bringing up, I think that's really important. We don't know what our revenue position is. There are some bills out there that could really help us tremendously. And this year, even they increased the pilot numbers, and we might even see a small bump in the pilot. I think we are definitely not going to be digging. I'm pretty sure we're not going to be digging into our excess levy capacity like we thought we were to the tune of $13,000. I think it's probably going to be the other way. So I just don't think we should commit to anything at this point.
Right.
Okay. I would agree with you, George. I think what we do want to do, though, I think early is reassert our expectation that we're going to utilize a method, the modified statutory method, however the budget falls out this year, right? So whatever percentage increases the four towns end up experiencing, I think we want to set an expectation that we want to get back
That's off limits.
to and with by starting the process earlier, we ought to be able, right? The region ought to be able to avoid the problem we had last year, which is it just became too complicated and too late in the game for us to be applying the modified statutory method. And so there's enough planning and enough time to make sure that this year's budget does bring us back to that. Maybe there'll be some guardrails, but it won't be the kind of process we saw last year.
If I'm maybe April, I would just say, moving around the assessment method isn't going to solve the problem. And trying to get Shutesbury to pay a little extra under some other method they want to use, it's not going to make a difference. It's not a lot of money.
Yeah, there's a structural problem, and more money definitely needs to come from the state. But I concur that we need to. How do you pronounce the superintendent's name? Z.
Yeah.
I would like to support her completing the audit that she's proposing, because I think that's a really good place to start. And I absolutely agree that we need to be pushing our modified assessment method that we worked so hard and not come out with, not a percent, but use the statutory modified method that we have.
Yeah. I just wanted to share one point that I thought was pretty persuasive that this field director from Tracy Novick shared, which is she really cautioned people against doing a kind of per pupil spending comparison between one district and a neighboring district. Like that's a kind of common theme to, I think, some of the comments we hear at these four towns meetings. Well, why are we spending this amount of money per student? And why does that look so different from a neighboring community? And you'll see her articulate this point when you watch her presentation, but I think she made a really strong, argument for avoiding that kind of overly simplistic way of kind of analyzing this information. And I also just want to share, if you had a chance, again, you didn't have much time, but if you had a chance to look at the slide deck, there's, Bob, I think you were alluding to this slide, which kind of shows an overall enrollment pattern of, significant decline over the last 25 years. When you go to the next slide, one of the things you'll see is that, we as a proportion of our enrollment, we are serving as a region a significantly higher proportion of both low-income students and students with disabilities, and maybe to a lesser extent, English language learners. And, the foundation budget, right, tells us that it costs more to educate these subpopulations than it does students that don't fall into one of these subpopulations. So I just want us to kind of, as we have these conversations, to kind of keep in mind that there's a little bit of nuance to this kind of trend that I think we've talked about enrollments and how they've changed over time. It's definitely true that the district is serving fewer students than it had 20 years ago, but the students that we are serving have significantly different characteristics, and some of those characteristics come with a responsibility to provide services that don't come with additional funding. So that's, I think, an important a bit of nuance for us to have. Anyway, I'll stop sharing this now, but just wanted to mention that. Okay, so let's see when this meeting gets scheduled. Like I said, it should be towards the end of this month. And you know, I think we ought to look at kind of what's on the agenda. That'll give us an idea about kind of what the scope of that discussion is going to be. Anything else on this topic?
So what are we gonna, what's our position? What are we gonna say to the region?
I think our position is, at this point, we want to see what, we want to see a variety of kind of budget models, right? Maybe some that are tied to the guidance that Pelham and Amherst have provided, some that are related to kind of level services budget, what that would look like, and what kind of increases that would result in for communities. But we want to assert expectation that the budget process is going to utilize the modified statutory method in making calculations about, member towns' contributions, and that's a really important point for us. I think, other than that, I don't think we have enough consensus to state any other positions at this point. Does that seem fair? Okay. One other school-related update. I had an exchange with Mateo about the track and field project. Let's see. I'm going to share his email. There is news on this that I think you all should be aware of. Let's see. So ARP submitted a request for an additional $136,000 of open space recreation CPA funding from Shutesbury. Just to remind everybody, this is because the region is trying to move forward with the version of this project that has a $4.4 million budget. They don't have enough funds right now for a $4.4 million budget. And so the CPC has given them basically permission to submit an off-cycle request. They are going to vote on that application at their September 19th meeting. If the result of that meeting is yes, they recommend it as a committee, then that's another warrant article at the special town meeting that Becky's working on scheduling.
What was the date of that meeting?
Okay, so
What was the date of that meeting?
September 19th.
Okay, thank you. I'm just getting it for the minutes.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay. We would if this gets recommended by the CPC, obviously we're going to have a discussion as a committee about whether we recommend, approval of that warrant article when it comes before the special town meeting. Bob, I think I saw your hand up a minute ago. Did you have something there? No. Okay. So, all right. Let's see.
I'll just skip it for now.
Okay. Becky, can you, we need to have a discussion about this open meeting law violation. Can you fill us in on this?
Sure. Let me put up, so when we receive an open meeting law violation, one of our residents, Amanda Alex, submitted an open meeting law complaint to the state, to the AG's office, regarding the Shutesbury Finance Committee. And I apologize, I should have probably, I don't have a scan of this right now, but, so basically, let me just read it to you. The bottom line just is on July 30th, there was a select board meeting. The subject on the agenda was personnel board TA contract. A number of personnel board members ended up coming. The personnel board at no point in time had the opportunity to post a meeting ahead because this was, the agenda item was submitted late, just about an hour before the posting, the deadline posting of the agenda for the select board. And then when they saw it on the agenda, personnel board saw it on the agenda over the weekend, the chair emailed members of the committee saying our agenda item is going to be talked about by the select board. So a number of members showed up. I think 4 personnel board members showed up. And part of the issue here is there was a transition July 1st. So we had the finance committee member to the personnel board had been George Arvanitis. Kathy Salvador was elected by the finance committee, and both members had been at the first meeting in July of the personnel board as they handed off traded duties. And they both had been involved in the issue that had been at the meeting where the issue was discussed, that the select board, that was on the select board agenda. And so we had ended up with the current members of the personnel board, April and Kathy, at the meeting. George also came, and Susie Mosier attended the select board meeting, as she often attends select board meetings. So Amanda Alex, in noticing that 4 members of the finance committee are a quorum, rightly put in a statement to the, it is correct that there should not have been a quorum without an agenda posted. Part of the problem with our long-standing committees is a number of these laws surrounding open meeting, a number of the subtleties have changed over time. So the members remember the days where you didn't have to post a meeting if you were talking only to the select board or the appointing body. But that's, at this point in time, we can't take that chance. It's too hard to determine who was exactly addressing who at a meeting. So we end up with a situation where the best course of action always is, if you have any idea, there'll be a quorum of your committee attending another meeting, to post an agenda for your committee at the other committee meeting. So I will read you what Amanda wrote, and then I'll put up a letter of potential response I'd like your input on. It's similar to what the lawyers have directed me to do in other cases, and then you can decide if you want to change the language. But right now, here's the description of the alleged violations. I contend that the Shutesbury Finance Committee violated the open meeting law when a quorum of committee attended a posted hybrid meeting of the Shutesbury Select Board on July 30th, 2024, and deliberated outside of a properly posted meeting regarding the agenda item. Personnel Board recommendation TA contract. Since this agenda item's recommendation was to request that a representative from both the Personnel Board and the Finance Committee be present at future town administrator contract negotiation sessions, and since 3 members of the Personnel Board are also Finance Committee members, which is not true, there are only 2. are also finance committee members and 4 constitute a quorum, it should have been anticipated that a quorum would attend. And of course, since the meeting wasn't known about, nothing could have been anticipated. But that doesn't change the situation. During that meeting, members of the committee who were physically present sat near each other. They discussed matters within their jurisdiction that would later be discussed and voted upon at a finance committee meeting on August 12th, where some of the same statements made at the select board meeting were repeated. An individual who earlier spoke as a personnel board member later prefaced additional comments by identifying himself as a finance committee member, formerly of the personnel board. Another member of the finance committee made statements that echoed opinions voiced earlier in the meeting regarding policy and the makeup of the negotiating team for the town administrator's contract. A remote member who identified as a finance committee member and personnel board member stated she agreed with her cohorts that there should be representation by both the personnel board and finance committee. A 5th finance committee member, also attending remotely, did not comment. What action do you want the public body to take in response to your complaint? Her response is, I want the Shutesbury Finance Committee to post meeting notices whenever there a reasonable expectation that a quorum will attend the posted meeting of another public body, and to record, approve, and publish meeting minutes accordingly. Okay, so let me bring up
Got it.
the letter, or did you want to do that? Do you have it, AJ?
I don't have it, so if you can,
Okay.
if you can share it.
Oh, shoot, where'd it
Hmm.
go? AJ, and I did email it to you, so you should be able to find it.
Oh, I'm not sure I saw it. Okay.
Yeah.
This is the draft response letter?
Yeah. I sent it to, it was right before the meeting, so.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
You don't have it.
All right.
As you can see from that folder, I have way too many open meeting
Mhm.
law violations on my computer. It's been a busy time. All right, so this is a letter to Amanda Alex that will also be sent to the Open Meeting Law Division of the Attorney General's office. Can everybody read it? Does it need to be bigger?
Yes.
Is that better?
So this is standard format that you use, Becky? for
Yeah.
these?
So basically, first paragraph, we received your complaint, we respond according to statute. Second paragraph, in summary, describe what happened. And the third paragraph is, we understand we screwed up. And fourth paragraph, in conclusion, the Finance Committee believes your complaint is a violation of OML and will do their best not to let it happen again. So in this,
Just to clarify, make sure, just for the sake of avoiding these issues in the future, it wasn't an issue that just 4 members of the FinCom attended the meeting. It was that 4 members attended and made contributions to the meeting. Is that is
yes,
that an important distinction? Okay.
yes.
Got it.
If all 4 members had been silent, or
Mhm.
if even only 3 of them had spoken, like she didn't count the
Mhm.
5th member that stayed silent.
Right.
So,
Okay.
so if you do notice, because this is a very tough situation to anticipate,
Yeah.
and So you just have to be aware that if you are at a meeting with a number of your people from your group, and it's really difficult to know that because if you're at the hybrid meeting, you probably don't know who's on the, there's often 2 pages on the Zoom, so you're not going to see everybody on screen. So it's pretty tricky to figure out. But I
Yeah.
think given this experience, maybe well, it's tough because meetings change at the last, it's
Yeah.
very difficult to post select board meetings ahead of 48 hours. There's
Right.
continual change to the agenda through that last week. And so how do you even know? You most of
Right.
the time know, like if you're at a meeting tonight, you don't know well, I just posted the select board meeting for Tuesday, but then everybody would have to I think it's
It's hard,
only
right? Because I don't.
select
Yeah,
board.
because yeah, I mean that would require that I would look at the agenda for Tuesday's select board meeting, and I've got to, if I'm going to post a meeting, I have to do it with enough notice. So it is hard, but I think there are a couple things that we can do to avoid these issues in the future. I mean, one would be certainly if we are asked by the select board or any other body to, or notified that there's potentially a FinCom related agenda item and they're actually seeking some input from us, that's a no-brainer, right? We should be posting that. If they're specifically asking, us to contribute to a meeting. Okay. I think what can happen in this more ad hoc situation, which was hard to anticipate, is, and let me just run this by you guys, see if it's, if it makes sense. But like, if you're attending a meeting of another board, it's not a posted FinCom meeting. You see other FinCom members contributing to the meeting. I think is it a reasonable expectation that we keep track of how many FinCom members have commented during the meeting? And if you see that 3 other members have already commented at the meeting and it's not a FinCom posted meeting, that ought to, I think, that ought to caution you that it's probably not appropriate for you to speak at the meeting. Is that a crazy idea? But Susie?
That's not a crazy idea. It's just the reason people go to meetings and contribute is because they care. So here we come up to September 19th, the CPA meeting, and we're encouraged to be aware of it. And do we have some input because we've been talking about it and thinking about it? Sure. And not all of it's because we're on FinCom. I guess the word deliberation is not totally clear to me, but I think the solution that you're talking about and the solution in this letter is the solution. But I guess I would feel that people can easily be caught unaware because we're a group of people that care about this town and we work on it and we show up.
Right.
And then keep your mouth shut. Well, that's really rewarding.
Right. I know. Stuff. Bob.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One, who's going to submit the minutes for this meeting? Because it was a meeting. That's number one. Number two, as a member of this committee who was not informed, was not aware of this issue that was the subject of that I guess led these members of the finance committee to go to this meeting. I see it from that point of view. As a member of the committee, you don't want your committee to go and advocate or argue in favor of a position as finance committee members without letting all your colleagues know that this is a running concern for the committee. So I think the letter is a good letter. It covers the territory you need to cover. And I think we have to be aware of this. As Becky has described our obligations under the law, I think it's a good thing that this law exists, and we should try to be more careful in the future.
George?
Yeah, a question to Becky. Is this is coming from the town administrator, this letter?
No, that's why you guys are.
Well, can we see the bottom? Just see who's. Got it. Got it. Okay. Yeah. So when did this law change? Because I think everybody in that room, we actually talked about it in that meeting. And, one of the select board members said, didn't recognize this as being an issue at the
Melissa.
time.
Right. Melissa
Yeah.
said it wasn't an issue. So the problem is it has changed 3 times since 2012. And the most recent changes were in 2020. And we have not had, how you might all recall Susie's meeting where she had different hats and we had a really good, we had a session on OML at one point. We have not had a town clerk sponsored OML session, and we desperately need to do that because things that long timers are assuming are true are no longer true.
Yeah.
And so I think it's something that the select board needs to follow through with grace and make sure that the next all boards meeting has a significant section on open meeting law. And hopefully people will attend because these complaints are time consuming for everybody.
I would suggest, I think it's a great idea. I would suggest that it gets recorded and made available to people who can attend. The other thing I wanted to say about this was sometimes we have difficulties because we have people who serve on multiple committees, like Melissa for the personnel board. Melissa is one of the members. So if 2 other personnel board members show up, they've got a quorum. So we really do have to be very conscious of this and really pay attention to it. And all departments should be thinking about it for sure. It's an educational lesson for me. I didn't realize that this was an issue.
Yep. Things change.
Yep.
So I will leave this in your box for everybody to come sign. I've been told that the signatures, I'm going to send it in without them. And again, when I get them all, it's just you guys don't have the best track record on timeliness. I still have a few transfers that, well, AJ made sure we have a quorum now on each of the transfer sheets. But if you would come in and sign this, that would be great. And I'll get this sent over to the Attorney General's office.
Becky, a quick question, clarification for me. You said something about if we put ourselves on the agenda of the select board, that would somehow solve the problem. Is that true? Is I understand that right?
I'm not sure. Are
We'd
you?
have to post it.
We have to post a meeting, Bob. Yeah.
You have to post a meeting. Okay, so that's easy to
A
understand.
FinCom meeting that runs simultaneous to the, in this case, it would have been a
No,
select
you
board
have to
meeting.
post a meeting.
Yeah. So to that, I
one
guess
more
to that
comment.
point, oh, sorry, go ahead, George.
No, I just one point Becky made. I went and signed the transfer forms the other day, and I just want to reiterate what she just said, that some of the transfer forms need to be assigned. I noticed that when I signed the transfer forms, that there was transfer forms underneath them, and I noticed some people signed the top transfer forms, but the bottom ones had no signatures or one. So if you think you signed the transfer forms, you probably haven't. And when you go back, you should go through those again and make sure your signature's on all of them. Because I noticed that the other day. I can't remember when I was down in town hall sometime last week.
Yeah.
I signed about 10 of them.
Yeah, me too. But I noticed some people didn't. Yours is probably the one signature I saw, and on the other ones. But I saw some people sign the top ones, but didn't sign the bottom ones.
Yeah. So when you go in to sign this letter, just there's a stack. They're all together, all these transfer request forms. So just take a look, go through all of them, and just sign any that you haven't signed.
And Kathy, you're off the hook except for one of them.
Okay, I was going to ask what they were in the first place. So
Yeah, I think you were the transfer at your first meeting, July 9th. I think you're part of the closeout fiscal 24 transfer.
Oh,
But
yeah.
Okay.
but we're prior to
So
that.
Kathy, sometimes we take action at our meetings that involve a transfer of funds from the FinCom reserve fund or, some emergency that's come up or some unanticipated expense. When we do that, it requires a transfer form to be signed by members of the committee, or at least from the quorum of the committee.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's what they refer to. Okay, maybe what I might send an email out next week asking for a head count of who anticipates going to the September 9th CPC meeting, and if it
19th.
looks like the 19th, right, September 19th,
Yeah.
and if it looks like we might run, have potentially a quorum there, I'll go ahead and post it. So I'll send an email about that. Okay, Susie.
I just wanted to mention that there is going to be a fall town newsletter. And we, one time, maybe two times, put an article in that was a little bit of a summary of what had happened and where we are. And I don't want you to take that on yourself, AJ. You've done that before. Maybe there's a volunteer to do that. I think it helps because some people didn't come to town meeting, and it helps to sort of keep people informed. And we used excerpted information from our annual finance new report. It's
Do you know
not,
what the deadline for that is, Susie?
I haven't seen that yet. Maybe
Okay.
Becky knows.
Jim?
Yeah, all of these forms to be signed are all in the FinCom mailbox. Is that correct?
Yes.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and Becky, you might as well correct the spelling of my name if you want to make it
That'd be
truly.
great.
Okay.
I'm sorry, could you spell it for me, Jim? I'm
Just
not
one, just one M.
Just one M.
much better. Thank you, Jim.
Mm-hmm.
Except I just printed it and put it in the box. I'll do it.
Sorry about that.
You can just strike that letter.
Kathy?
Well, I thought Jim was going to mention the thing that I was going to mention, Becky, so,
Hey,
but he didn't. Just one minor typo. When a quorum of their members attends, a quorum is, I think that should be a
I'm
singular.
sorry.
right?
A quorum of them. So that last sentence of that paragraph.
has
When a
double
quorum
I.
of their
Thank
members
you, Kathy.
attends meetings.
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Go all the way up and make sure that there aren't any others. I think we might be good.
I think it's good.
All right. Great. Okay, George.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Becky, if she would just if she could send us a copy to us, it would be helpful to remind us to go into town meeting, and I'd like to have a copy of this.
Mhm.
And
You
also,
want an unsigned, not a signed copy?
yeah, it doesn't matter to me if it's signed or not. Yeah, this is what we're gonna be signing, right?
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
want to have it as a reference.
Sure.
For my records. And AJ, I'm sorry, earlier in this meeting, you said you were going to send us the link to the DESI presentation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So when as soon as we wrap up, I'll send you an email.
Perfect. Yeah, because I'd like to read it sooner.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So what I'm sending you is a link to the YouTube recording of the regional school committee meeting that happened on August 27th, and I'll send you the time code for when our presentation started. So you can just fast forward to that point.
That's right.
Okay, Susie.
I hate to heat this up a little bit, but I'm going to be doing those forms. I feel like AJ's done a lot. George is doing the minutes, so perhaps one of the people who hasn't been doing some writing could take on writing the report for the town newsletter. And maybe as a group, we don't agree that it helps, but I believe that when we're talking about people getting information, this is one of our few sources we can do it.
Anybody want to volunteer for that? April?
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
I'm a middle child. No, I can get that. What was the date this needs to be done by?
Do you have the deadline, Becky, for the fall town news?
I'll have to say, I'm doing a mailer tomorrow. I don't want to give out the wrong date right now.
Okay, but not right now,
Okay,
not today.
okay.
I'll send it to you, but it's, I think I can't remember.
That's all right.
We changed it like 7 times,
Yeah, I bet.
so I have a chance giving you the wrong date.
April,
Just
if it's
hold the
helpful, I'll
presses.
send you.
No, I can just,
If
I
it's
can
helpful,
look,
I can send you the text that I shared with them the last time we did this, I think, which was probably
That's-
2 years ago.
yeah, I can just go through minutes and just pull things out that
Or
way.
the
Okay.
finance committee report is really helpful.
Yeah, our annual
That is
report is kind of the
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
send
the
that,
best
yes.
resource for this. So I'll share that with you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Any other, I know we've been going kind of long tonight, but any other business for us to discuss? Any updates? Jim?
I have just a completely unrelated question, that
Go for it.
if you don't want me to continue. We spent $5,000 for the insect, for that committee to take a look at the insects. Have they been doing a good job on that, Becky? I'm wondering, because a lot of us who live around the lake are concerned about Tripoli and all that's been going on with mosquito problems. And I'm just wondering if we're getting our money's worth on notification that there might be or might not be a problem here in Shutesbury. Because that information doesn't seem to be very well known or distributed, as far as I can tell.
Board of Health.
The Board
Well, I
of
know that-
Health is monitoring
Yep.
all of their information, and they put out notices to the public.
Mhm. And you've gotten those notices?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. A commentator on National Public Radio commented that a lot of these insect research projects, they weren't coordinating with each other, and so the database wasn't being updated very well, and so nobody really knew what one town was doing and another town was doing, and it was really important to try to get all towns to feed information into one central source so that a pattern could be seen in how these infestations are spreading or not spreading. That's what brought up my concern, that's all. I just don't know how
The
that.
gentleman who does the field work has come and met with them, and he's very good. And as someone who was in an emergency room quarantine because I thought I had Tripoli, I appreciate the updates that we get.
Well, if
Jim, if you
Yeah.
want to search for this Pioneer Valley Mosquito Control District,
Yeah.
you'll get this web page.
Mhm.
And then if you scroll down, you'll see the surveillance reports. I don't know, maybe that might be useful information for you.
Yeah.
It looks like there was one
Yeah.
in April. Maybe that's
Well,
helpful.
Well, I was just checking because we had some discussion
Yeah.
about whether we were getting our money's worth on this. And then there's the other issue having to do with whether these reports are really being synchronized with all the ones from all over New England, for example, to see whether there's a problem and if it's sort of moving one way or another. Just a lot of people are concerned about it, that's all, including myself.
All right.
thank you.
Any other? Sure. Any other business? Any other updates? Okay. So we are going to meet again on, what is it, the 17th?
Yes,
Is that right? Yep.
yes.
17th. And I think if all goes as I think planned, we're going to we'll do a little Four Towns meeting that'll happen later this month. Susie, I think you've got everything you'll need for getting those budget. I appreciate that. And April, I'll send you the text that I shared, but obviously don't you don't feel obligated to use that as your template. Okay, so I'll make a motion for us to adjourn.
Second,
Okay.
governance side.
George,
Groves, aye.
Hemingway, aye.
Cashew, aye.
Mosier, aye. You're
Oh, I
muted.
could read your lips, Kathy.
Yeah.
Yes, I said aye. Salvador, aye.
And Stein, aye.
All right.
All
Thank
Good
right.
night, everybody.
Good night,
Good
everyone.
night.
I
Night.
Night.
Take care.